Welcome, everyone, to our next installment of GEMA Talks. We are joined today by Lindsay Amstutz. Lindsay is a Georgetown Law School grad and has had just a terrific, really interesting career, primarily in sports, across a number of different parts of the sports ecosystem. And I'm thrilled to have her here today to talk about her career and talk about trends in the industry. And she is currently the Chief Media Officer and and Head of Integrated Sales and Marketing for OneTeam Partners, which is a company she's going to explain in a minute, which has very quickly become a major player in the sports media world. But we're thrilled to have you here, Lindsay. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Rich.
Great to have you.
To be here.
Let's start off by, if you could explain a little bit what OneTeam Partners is. It has a really unique place in the ecosystem today, and so I'm excited for people to learn more about it.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Yes, OneTeam Partners was founded a little over 2 years ago by the players associations, NFLPA, MLBPA, along with our other partners, WNBAPA, MLSPA. And when you think about players unions, you think about how great they are at collective bargaining. But these players associations have a varying degree of resources and less sort of commercial expertise. And that's why OneTeam was founded, to help them, especially in the areas of licensing, but also in content, sponsorship, sales, marketing, other aspects where we can sort of almost be the union for the unions, as these unions come together, and we can help them on all aspects of the business side, which then in turn helps the players that they are designed to serve.
Right, great. And you've also, and also by representing so many different unions, you have the ability to talk to different potential clients on a bigger scale, right? And be able to offer them a lot more than you would if just one, union goes in on their own, or one PA goes in on their own, right? There's a lot, I'm sure you have a lot very more interesting, fulsome conversations.
No, 100%, and whether it's with a brand or a video games licensing or a trading card partner, that's absolutely the case, where all of a sudden we can bring all of that knowledge and expertise and really be a one-stop shop for those partners as well.
Terrific. I'm going to rewind, and I'd love to talk to you and talk more about from the beginning. If you could just quickly tell everybody, where you're from and where you grew up, and then how you got to Georgetown Law School and kind of what you did in college and what you were thinking you wanted to do with your life during that time.
Oh, great question. Absolutely. And I love it because you play a big part in this, Rich, which makes the story that much better. But I grew up in Southern California, just north of Los Angeles, in the stereotypical Valley. The Valley. I try to lose the Valley girl accent throughout the years, but I hated sports. I was a ballerina and danced all throughout my youth. And then my little brother came along, and he likes to take credit for my now career, essentially, because I really got to know sports through him. And it was a good family friend who said, "Hey, you should try out for your basketball team. You're pretty tall and you're coordinated enough because you've been dancing." And sure enough, I ended up at a summer basketball practice and sort of never looked back. Just fell in love with sports and the power of sports for both genders, but particularly everything it does for women in terms of teaching teamwork and competitiveness and what have you. So at that point, started playing high school basketball, but was a little bit late to the party, and had the chance to go off to Stanford for college. And there was no way I was going to make that team because they went to the Final Four my freshman year. And not even going to try to walk onto that squad. Sure, but I did the next best thing, which is I did their laundry. I was their manager for a good couple of years.
Were you the manager?
I was.
Well, that's great.
Which was awesome. It was a great way to be it was a great way to be a part of the team, and then kind of fell into working in the athletics department. And this was sort of back in the day when there was no sports management degree. Like, I wasn't even sure that this was a real career, but I knew I loved it. And so it was something that I kind of pursued throughout college, just working with whichever Stanford team would hire me, whether it was the women's volleyball team, et cetera. And when it came time to graduate, a good kind of mentor of mine had become the head athletic director at Santa Clara University. And she said, "Hey, why don't you come down here? You seem to like this sports thing." And I was like, "Absolutely." So I did college athletic marketing for a few years. But at that point, as much as I loved wearing the mascot costume and playing music for the college baseball games, I was like, I think there might be something else out there for me. I'd always had an interest in the law. Actually, growing up in Southern California, I went to a high school that was a law and government magnet. And although I gave the tours and said, hey, you can go here even if you never want to go to law school or be a lawyer, because I never want to go to law school or be a lawyer. And then in college, I bounced around some majors and ended up finding political science. And I was like, I just love it. Like, I'm never going to go to law school, though. Anyway, so a few years into college athletics, I'm like, God, I really am passionate about politics and civil rights and other things, and I just kind of love the law. So I did what you shouldn't do, which is I went to law school because it teaches you how to think, or I don't know what I was like. I won't, even going into law school, I was like, I won't be a lawyer. I won't take the bar. And so as she rolls her eyes, and so needless to say, I end up at Georgetown. And it had just sort of always been the school I wanted to go to. You can always tell even when you're applying. Sometimes it was like I signed my name a little bit nicer on the Georgetown application because I just knew I wanted to go there, and got there. And as fellow Georgetown colleagues know, I mean, there's just no better place to go to law school than in DC, because you walk down and hear oral arguments at the Supreme Court, and you're just in it in a way that is fantastic. But being in law school, I also realized that they teach you to be a lawyer, and that probably wasn't what, as I had told myself and others that I didn't want to be a lawyer. That was something I kind of realized quickly, and that I really did love sports. I love the people in sports. I just love the industry. So throughout law school, being in DC, had such great opportunities to stay involved in sports, and interned for the NCAA's Office of Government Relations, interned for the U.S. Olympic Committee during law school. Worked on Home Court, a charity basketball tournament to benefit the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless that pits Georgetown faculty versus members of Congress. And so just kind of stayed involved in sports any way I could, including interning for the NFLPA, which has now come full circle. But sure enough, graduated from law school with all kinds of great law school debt. And of course I was going to take the bar, and of course I was going to be a lawyer, and had an opportunity to work for an amazing firm, O'Melveny & Myers, out here in LA that did some sports work, and the law. And I was like, okay, how can I mesh these two things and make them fit together? And I tried it, and it was a great experience. But I also really, during that year, realized that while I wanted a seat at the table, it wasn't the general counsel seat, and it wasn't the lawyer seat, and that I was just a bit more interested and passionate about the business side of the industry. But so grateful for that legal.
Were you able to work on any sports clients while you were there?
I was. They one in particular, they represented the International Olympic Committee on their broadcast rights deals, and having interned at the U.S. Olympic Committee, and I'm still incredibly passionate about the Olympics, and was perhaps even more so in that era of my life. And so the chance to work on those deals was fantastic, but also eye-opening in the sense that those were broadcast rights deals designed to maximize revenue, and exposure for the IOC. And what I realized is that the IOC was never going to call me and say, how do we grow the Olympic movement? Or how do we do other things? They were going to call and say, where's my contract for Japan? And that's was very super helpful, because I realized that wasn't, that wasn't my passion. So it's one of the best decisions I've made, because it kind of helped me check something off the list, and I could, by process of elimination, know what I was really passionate about.
So how did you then, so you're at O'Melveny, and you're obviously thinking, boy, I really want to get into the sports industry. What do I do now? How did you make that transition? And I think you worked at the NBA. That was your first role, right?
Yeah.
So how did you make that from being a junior attorney at O'Melveny & Myers to suddenly you're working at the NBA?
Yeah.
In a non-legal job.
In a non-legal job. Exactly. Certainly the benefit I had was that I'd worked in sports before law school. So I know when I speak with a lot of lawyers who maybe they went straight from undergrad to law school to, now they're fifth, sixth year, and they're like, hey, how do I make the jump? And I was like, well, to be fair, I did sports before law school. I did sports during law school, and then there was sort of this one little year where I was a real lawyer. But much like so many roles in the sports industry and many industries, it was who I knew, right? So there was one morning in August, I was driving to the law firm, and I had the chance to speak with a Stanford colleague, Amy Brooks, who now remains at the NBA, and she was working at the NBA at the time as well. And I was like, Amy, what do you do? And what do you just tell me all about it? And we had an informational call, and the end of it, she was like, well, you're pretty into women's basketball, right? And I was like, yeah, that's a big part of my resume. And she's like, well, send me your resume. We're hiring somebody in this group that the NBA has called Team Marketing and Business Operations, which is like their think tank for all of their teams across the NBA, W, and G League in terms of sharing best practices, et cetera. And so had the opportunity to interview, through a few other people also that I'd met along the way, just by volunteering and being active in the sports space. And then a few weeks later was given notice and moving to New York to go join the NBA, with a real focus on the WNBA business.
Wow, that's great. And if you can expand a little bit more on the kind of things you did in that job, because I think it is an interesting group within the NBA that a lot of people probably don't even realize exists.
Absolutely. It's an amazing group in that it is really focused on servicing the teams, and set up almost in a traditional consulting fashion to help the teams share best practices. I was an account manager, so I had 5 WNBA teams that were quote unquote mine. So I would travel pretty much every week. As I like to say, my stuff lived in New York and had a great time. And on the weekends, I'd go visit it. And then on Monday, we were all in the office, and Tuesday, we're flying out to one of our teams as a way to, be of service if they needed something. I would meet with everybody from the team president down to interns to see what was working, and then at that end of the week, make suggestions with a real focus on ticket sales and sponsorship. And so for me personally, it was a tremendous professional sports boot camp, that I got a sense of the sales side of things and really how the business of sports works.
Yeah. And then from there, you did transition to a team. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. Our leader at the time, a guy named Scott O'Neill, who's now just taken a post over at Merlin after some amazing stints in sports. During the interview process, really the Teambo goal was, hey, you're going to come here for 2 years, as he told me, and then we want you to go work for a team, because you get to see so much across all the leagues. And so you learn so much. And then if you can go out to a team and apply it, then that's sort of the best of all worlds. And so had a chance to follow a woman I'd worked closely with at the league office, Kirsten Bernert, who became the president of the Sparks. And so she hired me for a full-time marketing position, which, as I mentioned, I was traveling every week. And so it was real nice to come home to Los Angeles, working for my hometown WNBA team and get off the road for a little bit as well, which was nice.
And how many years had the Sparks already been in existence at that point?
Oh, gosh. Let's see, 97, about 20, a little over 20, right?
Okay,
so 7.
10.
No, 10. Yeah.
10.
10. Mm-hmm.
So what was your top mandate there?
Top mandate there, it was really on the marketing side. So, the WNBA still today, unfortunately, but especially then, was exposure, and how do you increase sort of that brand awareness and get more butts and seats always consistently to sample the product. Because the one thing that's remarkable about the WNBA is once you go to a game, you realize, oh my gosh, like the quality of play is amazing, the entertainment's amazing, the enthusiasm that the crowd conveys. It is a great product, but getting people to try it who haven't tried it, particularly, gosh, what was that, 10 years ago? Yeah, or more, 15, a little more than 10 years ago. It's just kind of continuing to grow that brand awareness. And that was certainly one of my tasks.
And, people maybe don't realize, but that job is a very blocking and tackling day to day, working closely, with you're trying to figure out how to get the fan base to come, right? It's not this like, you're not talking about, it's very like, a lot of it's not sexy.
Mm-hmm. No,
right?
it's very true.
It's a really important job, but it's also like meat and potatoes. Like you must have really learned a lot in that job.
100%.
About like working for a team and what it takes every day to get butts in the seats.
Definitely. Because even after every game, you had to show up the next morning, even no matter how late you went to bed, you're showing up the next morning because you had another game 2 days, 2 days after, or a day after. And so kind of constantly being ready to perform to that extent.
And hopefully I would assume in that job, there was some level of creativity because you're trying to think of interesting new promotions and interesting new marketing partners and things like that.
Absolutely. It's such a scrappy, innovative space. And we did everything from holding a game outdoors to, yeah, to things with the mascot. And so it was a really fun canvas to try a lot of different ideas and partnerships.
And so after that, you spent probably what, a couple of years there?
I ended up spending about a year, and I thought
Yeah.
I was going to be there forever. When I came back, it was such sort of a dream in that sense to be back home and with the WNBA team. I'd gone to the very first Sparks home game, so
Yeah.
passionate about women's basketball, loved the underdog, and thought I was going to be there maybe even the rest of my career, to be honest. Excuse me. And but one of the fun aspects of working with teams is that ownership groups can sometimes change, especially in women's sports. And all of a sudden, the person who had hired me was no longer there. And I remember reaching out to a few colleagues, and one of them was you, to say, "Oh wow, I don't know if this is going to be my long-term plan." It was for, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, it was, but all of a sudden things had changed. And so at that point I started looking for other opportunities. And you were nice enough to connect me to the head of talent acquisition over at Fox, and took a meeting with her, and she put me in touch with someone else, and kept in touch, and really hadn't thought about TV at all, especially being an LA gal. Hollywood was kind of like gross, or something. And I'm like, TV, ew, or I don't know. It wasn't my thing. I worked in sports. And so, but kept in touch, and there was an opportunity that came open at the regional sports network in LA, Fox Sports West and Prime Ticket. And through those relationships that I had cultivated over, I think it was months, it wasn't overnight, had an opportunity to apply for the director of marketing position at the regional sports network. Yeah.
And again, very also marketing, but a completely different job than the one at the Sparks, right?
Very different. Very different.
What were some of the required skills, and what was your kind of day-to-day job goal? What was the mandate there? Versus what you were doing before?
One of the biggest mandates, and this is true for the regional sports network business, was to support the teams. And that was certainly a big reason why they hired me, I think, because I didn't have a breadth of TV experience or on-air promotional, an on-air promotional portfolio to share, but I really understood the teams, after having worked at the
and how to approach them, and what how they think.
Exactly. And so when Fox Sports was kind enough to hire me, they're like, okay, we can teach you the TV side, but you bring that core foundation of being able to support the team and understand what the teams need. And so then from there, it was really just sort of appreciating all of the assets that we had. And I remember calling a colleague of mine at the NBA, and I was like, you need to understand that there's me and there's other marketing directors at the RSNs who literally spend all day trying to think about how we can help our teams, and because we have all of this on-air promotional, commercial time, on-air promotion inventory, and all the assets within the broadcast itself. And so how can we help the teams not only promote, next night's or the upcoming game, but how can we help the team promote ticket sales? Because if you go to a game and you get really fired up, you're probably more likely to watch the next one. So even though if you might think the broadcast and the team had a bit of competition, but in reality, no, we all saw it as one kind of tight ecosystem, that if you're a season ticket holder, fantastic, because you're probably not going to travel to every road game, which means you're going to tune in and you're going to watch our broadcast. And so that was a really fun opportunity to, unlike the team where you really have your social media channels and limited to kind of that in-game experience, TV just sort of opened up a whole nother world of opportunities from a marketing and promotional standpoint. And I got really excited about it, which is why I stayed a while.
You had quite a ascent there, and it culminated in you becoming the general manager and the head of Fox Sports West and Prime Ticket. And then you also took on Fox West in San Diego as well. So talk about what that was like, because now you're the leader, now you're in charge of the whole kit and caboodle. So talk about what it was like in that leadership role, and curious maybe what you learned from that role or what you brought to that role and your leadership style. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was such a great run, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And when I think back to, certainly I know what I tried to bring to it was that, it's where I had started. I had kind of grown up there. It's still, I still look at Fox Sports West as my home, as my family, and those folks. But some of the challenges or the more interesting aspects too is that when you maybe are seen by some as the director of marketing still, or is that gal who just started a few weeks ago, and then now all of a sudden you're in charge of managing people who were peers or even maybe more senior than me. That was an interesting challenge, and one I'm grateful, because I think all of my colleagues really gave me a chance, which was awesome. But I worked really hard to earn it too, and obviously there were aspects of the business that I hadn't necessarily done myself. I'd done the marketing job, but I hadn't sat in the producer's chair. I hadn't been the one solely responsible for ad revenue. Yeah. So really
also
working
negotiating hard. Rights deals. You must
negotiating rights deals. Yeah. And on the team side. And so overall, I mean, I think it's kind of just, as a leader, as a person, it's trying to build great relationships, showing a lot of respect for the folks and the experience that they have, and knowing and getting to know enough to where you can support them and make sure that they have everything they need to succeed. And I think that's what I've tried to do in most of my roles, both before, during the West role and now. It's a lot of the same thing, but a lot of it is relationships and doing what you say you're going to do, and being consistently committed to that, and being a good person, because it turns out that maybe that intern is now someone who either is reporting to me or I'm reporting to them, and either way I've got to have had a good reputation and a good interaction with them from the start.
Is there anything particularly you can cite that as when you took over the leadership, here are 2 or 3 things I did, that I think I'm really proud of that I did at in that role, or in that position?
One of the best things, and it's seemingly so simple, but one of the most helpful things, because we had, at the time, we had a bit of a culture issue, just trying to kind of bring the office back together in a lot of respects. And one thing that I did, and I didn't even realize it would be as valuable as it was when I started out, was I met with every single person one-on-one. And we're a pretty big org, so it took me a couple months. It took me a while.
Yeah, well, that shows real commitment, again, that you were saying, that you put the time in, and that's not common.
But Rich, it was so great too, because everybody, when they shared their perspective and could offer, what they saw and their ideas, there were so many great ideas. Like, I don't think I had to come up with a single idea on my own, because, the graphic designer had 5 ideas, and the office manager had 3 ideas of things that were going to help. And so really I got to sit in the fortunate position of curating them and then bringing them to life. But it was awesome to see how each person from the organization could add such value, sure, in whatever their day job was, but just also in some of the other aspects of helping our office become great. So that's one thing that didn't even know it would be as effective as it was. And, even just recently kind of almost did something similar, as I assumed a bit of a new role at OneTeam. And sure enough, like everybody has all the answers, it's not necessarily reliant on a leader to come in and I won't say force it down, but present it to them. But that's something I look back on, and obviously have carried it with me as something I'll continue to do throughout my career, because it works.
Yeah, great. So you had a long career at Fox, and they had an ownership change as well on the regional sports networks, and you stayed there after the change for a bit, I believe. But it sounds like you were ready for another new challenge. And again, I think what's so interesting about the OneTeam job is that, again, really, kind of a whole completely different job than the last job, which was a completely different job than the other one. So you have this like breadth and versatility to your career that is really unique and really, I think, quite fascinating. So talk a little bit about, what you've come to do at OneTeam. What's your real job? I mentioned chief media officer and head of integrated sales and marketing. What does that mean? Understand that.
No, definitely. And it was hard to make the decision to jump, because, as I mentioned, Fox Sports West was my was
Yeah.
my home, was my
Sure.
family, and it still is. But the OneTeam opportunity came along, and I hadn't even heard of them. You know, I remember when they reached out, it was like OneTeam Partners, and I was like, oh, you know, doing research on them, and decided to take a call, fully saying in my head, oh, I would never take this job, but I just don't know these people. I just want to make some new friends. And needless to say, yeah, one call turned into two, and turned into president, you know, and then all of a sudden, I got really, really excited about the opportunity, because while certainly the RSN business was changing, and, you know, but I was still passionate about that. But what OneTeam offered was a chance to be really closely aligned with the players, which I hadn't done working at a league or a team or a network where we work really closely with the team owners. And so to be aligned with the players, particularly at this moment in time, I was excited about. And the other opportunity was to build something at OneTeam, because it's a startup, you know, one with some very established roots in, you know, in players associations that have been around a long time, but nonetheless, it's a whole new world. And what I was lucky enough to be a part of at Fox was a very, very well run and well-oiled machine. And that's a different type of skill set, as opposed to, okay, it's a blank page and the answer isn't clear and you better come up with it. And so
very different.
Yeah, so that's been a lot of fun, as well as getting me a little bit more on the content side. So, you know, at Fox, had the fun of overseeing live sports, you know, but this is at OneTeam, the content media opportunities are more player focused. They're off the field, a bit more Hollywood adjacent than I had been, which, as you remember earlier on, I was like, Hollywood's kind of icky, but now I've fully embraced it, you know, and especially in the sort of the brave new world of streamers and just how we all consume content. It's been a lot of fun to work more on that side. And then similarly, you know, in terms of the day-to-day, it's looking for opportunities for the players associations in the content media space, but also among brands, and helping them just maximize the properties and the events and the assets that they do have, because they have a unique assortment of rights and events, you know, that are very different than the league or the team, and are different than on-field games and, you know, on-court activations, etc.
Sure.
But things that really have great impact in helping the players. And that's what it gets me excited about the job every day, is like, okay, you can actually help all the players, and not just the top 1%, because they're fine, they don't really need our help, but the entire.
That's a big part of it, right? You're really you're helping the collective. It's, you know, like you said, the top 10 players, they're all going to get their sponsorship deals, but you find ways to help, you know, generate revenues and opportunities for all the players.
Exactly. So how can we put more money in their pockets, you know, is certainly a point of pride for us.
Talk a little bit about, can you give examples of some things you've worked on thus far that you've been excited about?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that, you know, doesn't necessarily sit right in my org, but has been awesome to watch OneTeam participate in, is in the NIL space. You know, so NIL it's sort of the business that we're already in on the pro side, you know, in terms of the name, image, and likeness group rights for NFL players or WNBA players. But those are all collectively bargained and kind of handed to the PA as part of that process. On the college side, as you know, you and probably a lot of the listeners know, I mean, it's a little bit of the Wild West. And so it's a lot of that.
And that just for our audience to understand, that broke through, what, 2 years ago now or something, where college players now can actually make money, right?
Exactly. And so, but what OneTeam has been working to do is that, yes, the top 1% in the college space are going to get their money, but how do we help the products and the licensees that want to either sell products or use products or create products that engage a lot of players? So video games, trading cards, apparel. So one of the deals that OneTeam helped broker was with a company like Fanatics, you know, so now that you know, fans can buy t-shirts of their favorite football player, you know, with a player's name and number on the back of that t-shirt. And it's expanding into basketball, and it's expanding into more women's sports too. And so it's that one is a deal that an arrangement that I love, because probably for Fanatics, it's just not commercially feasible for them to go do a deal with 10,000 athletes. Like it just doesn't make sense, you know, in terms of how much money they're going to make. But if OneTeam is in that in that ecosystem and helping aggregate those rights, whether it's for a t-shirt or for a video game, then all of a sudden we can do it in a way that's much more efficient, and most importantly helps raise the bar and extend those opportunities for all the players. So as opposed to
you can go to Fanatics with something a little more turnkey where they don't have to do as much work.
Exactly. And then all of those players get to benefit from that exposure. So that's been a really fun aspect of what OneTeam's been involved in. And then I think another example is just trying to help the PAs, make their events that much more special. And so the U.S. Women's National Team PA on the soccer side held an amazing event in New York in early November, celebrating the players and the equal pay moment and movement, if you will. And so there were U.S. Women's National Team soccer players from the past and from the current team, and they just were celebrated at a fantastic event that was worthy of them. Is the way I would say it. And
OneTeam helped. Did you help conceive of the idea as well, or more?
We were supportive. Yeah, we were supportive, and we helped bring in some brands that helped enhance it. That helped enhance the event, which was great, and something we'll continue to do more of. Yeah. So those are two easy examples of some of the stuff that OneTeam's been up to.
In terms of the trends, obviously, you mentioned NIL for sure. That's obviously a huge trend. Talk a little about too, like just how social media has changed, like the kind of power of the players and the direct relationships they can have. Now, talk about how that's changed the business and the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of goes back to part of the reason I was so excited about the OneTeam, the OneTeam opportunity at this moment in time, because what technology has done for players and creators, across the space, it's just allowed this one-on-one relationship with their fans. Whereas before, if you think back to players, they were limited to that once a week national broadcast that they had no control over, other than maybe as they're walking off the court interview. Like that was their sort of one chance to really speak directly, which is crazy. And now through social media and through other outlets, you're seeing a bunch of players start their own production companies. They're getting so involved in investing, like they're just doing all of these incredible things. And athletes have always been multifaceted, but now we really get to see it. And where OneTeam sits is, hopefully we get to help them amplify what they're doing, and for some, maybe even encourage other passions. And if even for others who are already along the way, is just how can we continue to support what they want to do and continue to give them additional resources to help achieve all those things. So to me, that's the trend that's so fascinating. It's just this increase in power among the players and their ability to really control their own brands and be their own brands and benefit from them.
Yeah. Tremendous difference from 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Super different. I'd love to shift gears a little and just talk about your thoughts on your management style and how you like to lead. We talked a little bit about some of what you did at Fox as well, but talk a little bit about some of your principles of leadership. How do you, if I talk to people who work for you at the company, what would be some of the adjectives they use to explain your leadership style or how you like to manage?
It's a great question. I can give you their names and numbers if you want to. If you
We'll give you specific people.
No, exactly. I think what they would tell you is that I'm me. Like I try really hard to just be sort of genuine and authentic and who I am. And I remember especially starting out looking up at other leaders and saying, oh my God, I can't do that because I'm not mean enough, or I'm not whatever enough,
salesy enough.
Exactly. All those things that maybe you think you have to be to achieve leadership positions. And I remember at one point, especially because there was one person I didn't really like, and I'm like, I don't want to be that. If I have to do that in order to make it to the top, then I'm not going to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be me. And I found that hasn't stopped me. If I don't have to be a mean, bad, salesy person, or to still be effective. And so just sort of being true to who I am and, my voice and how I approach things is, I'm pretty consistent, I think, and consistently me, which has been beneficial. or been effective, I guess I would say. And I think the other thing, I really put a lot of emphasis on, I don't ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself, and just sort of, especially I think because there's been times where I've been elevated to manage people who were my peers,
Right.
I know exactly what I'm asking them. And sometimes those requests were tough, and I knew, and just always trying to convey the fact that I'm like, I know I'm putting you in a bad position right now, but I need this by 2:00 or whatever it is. And
Right.
so just trying to be sort of empathetic to whatever
Right.
they're doing, and also always being willing to, hey, like I'll try to do it too. Some
Right.
things I can do, but I'll try to do it as well, and sort of
Yeah.
trying to lead from that position as well, and then just trying really hard to be a good communicator, which is really hard, especially across big organizations. And there's times where not all information can be shared, and but trying to communicate as much as I can whenever I can, and I think people have appreciated that, even at times when maybe they knew I couldn't say certain things, but they know, man, if I could tell them, they were going to know. And so,
Right. Right.
yeah, so those are three things that I think I would hope that people would tell you, and that I try to lead by.
I'm sure they would. The other thing, we've known each other quite a bit now. We haven't worked together too often, but I also find you seem like a very uh, uh, super curious person. Like
Yeah.
you want to learn and you want to absorb information, and you bring that energy, I think, too, which is really exciting. And you're open to trying new things, it seems like to me in my talks
Mhm.
with you. And is there something new and different we can do? Let's see if we can solve it. It may have barriers, but let's see what we can do. Am I accurate there?
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And by the way, I think at OneTeam, in some ways, you are creating some new paradigms and new models.
Absolutely.
It's a bit of the wild, like you said, it's the NIL is a bit of the Wild West, but even what you're doing, some of this is groundbreaking work because you've never really had a collective of PAs working together. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure in some ways, you're breaking new ground and creating new models and such.
No, definitely. And I love it when someone else has the idea, and it's and if they can teach me something new, or I feel like, especially in a leadership situation, like if it ends up being my idea, I'm like, come on, someone must have a better one. Let's
Right.
go. And
Right.
so yeah, bringing that kind of curiosity to anything and everything, I think, is a really great way to approach almost any situation.
It's great.
Yeah.
I'd love to conclude with some of your words of wisdom for folks who are listening in, who are either wanting to break into the sports industry, or maybe they're someone who's early on in their career. What are some of the key pieces of advice you'd like to give?
Well, picking up where we left off, be curious, read, do research, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
It's so much information is at your fingertips.
So
And
much. So
I'm
true.
shocked when I get on an informational interview and they haven't even Googled me, or they haven't Googled the company. And I'm like, oh gosh, come on, guys. Just so be curious, be a student. Because yeah, the more that you can teach me something, the more excited I am going to be about hiring you, and the more that I know that you're keeping up with the trends or keeping up with the
Right.
industry. It's just a great way, kind of a great approach. Second one, don't be a jerk. It is, it sounds so easy, but especially in sports, and I know you know this, Rich, and
Yeah.
it's a small industry, and it's
Mm.
so tight knit, and it's
Yeah.
something that I love about it, especially now being a few decades into my career. It's one of my favorite things about sports, because I
Yeah.
really do feel like I get to work with my friends more days than I don't,
Yeah.
and but you want to make sure that they're your friends 2 decades in. And so yeah, like kind of picking up an earlier theme, whether it's an intern or the boss, be good, do what you say you're going to do, and just don't be a jerk, because
Yeah.
especially in sports, we work long hours and we have to go to games and we have to travel, and I want to hang out with people I like hanging out with. And so
Yeah.
it's it kind of goes without saying, like, just don't be a jerk, because
Yeah.
it is a small industry, and it is if you don't have a great reputation, it goes around pretty fast. So work hard to make sure that you have a good one, and that you're working hard, whether it's a little intern role
Yeah.
or something bigger. So I think those would be my big two.
Good. Good. Hopefully we have a lot of nice, really well-mannered, ethical Georgetown students who are listening and who we know, hopefully, who have humility, who won't be jerks. And funny enough, it's actually true. I do hear this often from senior people who, when they do recruit people who went to Georgetown, I do hear that, which is, I just feel like the people from that school they seem like they're nicer people, and they seem like they're hardworking and have humility and are grounded. And you don't always hear that from other schools that people get recruited from. And I think it is something that Georgetown and Georgetown community can be proud of, because I actually think there's some truth to that. And it is really, like you said, it's really important as you move up in your career, especially to.
It's true. Yeah. Well, and then thank you to you and everything that you've created through GEMA. I mean, it's been a tremendous opportunity to connect with a lot of those great, ethical, kind Georgetown people. And there are so many amazing Georgetown alums in the entertainment
and sports
and
too.
sports space.
Yeah,
it's so fun. And so GEMA has been such a great excuse to bring a lot of us together. And thank you for that.
I'm glad to hear that. That feels great to hear.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome.
Good. Well, Lindsay, I think we're going to wrap up. It's been an awesome 45 minutes. And again, just loved hearing about all the different pieces to your career. It's been really interesting, and to hear about the evolution of your career and how it's taken twists and turns and all the different areas of sports that you've worked in so far. And I'm sure there's many more to come. But congratulations to you, and I really appreciate your time, and good luck with all of your work at OneTeam.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you, GEMA.
Have a great rest of the week.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.